I'll be reviewing this book while James eats his meal.
Yeah, I kind of monopolized the review. Got your invitation this morning. Speaking of reviewing, I should mention I'm having basically the same thing I had this morning. It was so good that when Pauline mentioned the possibility of having
a different meal, you decided to choose the same one again.
There we go. Yeah. So it's hard to beat that kind of review. More of the same. Okay.
So apparently grapes and salsa works.
Yeah. You know, like putting sweet things for someone with a sweet tooth like me into spicy dishes really works well because it's still tasty, but it isn't so hot.
All right. So I'm probably going to do this review in a couple parts because it's a big, thick book, and I actually enjoyed it. Eh? So I'm going to go over my notes. Page 2, in 2010, the first year of reliable U.S. statistics, super germs infected more than 2 million Americans and killed 23,000. The super germs spread easily through breathing machines, IV needles, catheters, blood pressure cuffs, carbapenem-resistant Enterobacteria CRE thrive on light switches, doorknobs, toilets, all sorts of things. So anyway, what I really wanted to do is talk about the super germs thing, because recently somebody said to me that they were concerned that we're all going to that we're not getting immunity to all sorts of things right now because everyone's wearing masks and stuff, and so to try to keep from getting COVID, and they said because this is how the super germs started, is by people not getting exposed to things, and that's not how the super germs started. Now there's a difference between your immunity to germs and the germs themselves. The super germs started because of overuse of antibiotics, mostly in livestock production. So that's how they developed. Super germs developed, the superbugs. It's like the pesticide treadmill. If you've heard about it, if you're a pesticide applicator or if you're a farmer, then you've heard of the pesticide treadmill. And once you get on using pesticides, you have to keep using them because you'll have, say, a few weeds or a few insects that won't be knocked out by the pesticide, and then you get stronger and more resistant. So it's like with you, when you're exposed to things, your immunity gets stronger, right? Usually, or else it just knocks you out. But as a whole, that's what they were talking about with the herd immunity, right? But that happens with other forms of life too. They become right, and so anyway, so this is actually that's a little bit, it's similar, but not exactly the same. So you have to keep your immunity up because these other the bugs are getting more and more superpowered against you. So you have to become stronger. And the fact is our diets are, there's too many people to feed, and so our diets aren't great. Some people.
That's in the whole world.
Yeah, the whole world diet of humans, right?
Yeah.
And so your immunity is going down and down and down, and the bugs are getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And I shouldn't laugh because we're living now in an antibiotic resistant age.
We're like Wile E. Coyote.
Yeah, there's very
He's
few
off the cliff that doesn't realize
yes,
it yet.
Exactly. That's where we are. So, page 11. The food industry hired chemists to extend the transport and shelf life of perishable goods to find chemicals that removed unpleasant odors, enhance the color of food, red for beef, lead chromate for mustard, arsenic for green vegetables. Page 12. 4 years before Food and Food Adulterants was published by Wiley, half of milk samples tested had been thinned with water and chalk and were full of bacteria. 90% of all ground coffee was cut with sawdust or dirt. Some dairies used formaldehyde to mask the odor of sour milk. Page 22. Wiley claimed caffeine was more dangerous than strychnine. 27. Virtually. In That's my note. I've gotten used to making note of it when I see it because it really bothers me. Page 28. It's like it tells me more.
You were
than the
already
word itself.
figuring coffee was
28.
pretty bad, right?
Yeah,
Just from your own experience.
It was called the Spanish flu because Spanish newspapers were the only ones in Europe that ran stories about it. It infected 500 million people, 1/3 of the world's population. Some estimated it killed 100 million in 16 weeks. Bubonic plague, 14th century, wiped out a quarter of humans over 10 years. So the Spanish flu happened more quickly. So
How
anyway,
long did they say it lasted?
he didn't say. He just
According
said
to Wiki,
in 16
it was
weeks
over
that it killed
after
them.
about 3 years.
Yeah.
But most of the damage was done in the first year. That's when they had their two installments, the main installments of it.
But James said that the reason that they were only running it in the Spanish newspaper is because this was wartime, right?
It was wartime when it started. It kept on going after the war ended. I think it was 18, 19, and 20, the 3 years that were put on the chart on Wiki. You can dial that up on Wiki and find out.
And so then, the other countries wouldn't have known, well, are people keeping track of this? And they don't want to show their weaknesses or anything.
Yeah, exactly right.
So they don't want to show.
Let's say you're German, and you don't want the Allies going, we're almost have them beaten. We've got them starved out, and now they're getting this bug. And the English would be feeling the same way. Like it looks as though we got the Germans on the run. This is 1918. Now, originally, the Germans had the French on the run. They almost made it to Paris. They had this last gasp, I think it was in spring, last gasp offensive, and they almost made it to Paris. And I don't think they would have defeated the French at that stage of the game because the English would have had, the English and mainly the Americans, what I had to do is just retreat out of Paris and say, okay, you want to do with Paris what you will, please don't destroy it, and it's all beautiful and stuff like that. Since 1850 or so, it was beautified by Napoleon III or whomever. So long as the French were willing to put up with that possibility of Paris being devastated, the Germans wouldn't have been able to defeat the French because the French had the Americans on their side, and America, I think at that point in time, was more powerful than France and England combined, and Germany combined with them.
So what were you saying about the death rate in the United States now, or so far?
Well, the death rate, I was checking it out, it's actually gone down.
Okay.
So for a while there, it topped off at 7%. So it looks as though it's down to 5%. But
their numbers are just so high.
Their numbers are going up now. So I think
it was 40,000 and then 48,000.
48,000 as of yesterday.
And
once they're saying in Texas, I believe they're almost maxed out. When it maxes out, it happened it didn't even, I don't think it totally maxed out, but it started doing in Italy. It was up to 12%. And, we've noticed the main places where it's happening in the United States now with the second wave is in the South. And I think a lot of people on CBC are saying, oh, that's so stupid, white racists down there. And they have a lot to do with the standards being set. But here's the pattern. In Europe, what were the places that got maxed out? Italy, Spain, France. Right next door to Italy, very early on, Germany got hit. Not the same reaction. So we predicted, Pauline and I, when it hits Canada, it's going to affect selectively Quebec. What happened? Yeah, same thing in the United States. It's to be expected. What are the places where there's a heavy Latino population? Well, it's very Catholic. Heavy in Texas Catholic and in all these, and they're saying in California, particularly Southern California. So the places that are getting hit right now, and why is that? I think it's because there's with Latinos, with Italian definitely, they say they've got the smallest social distance. any nation in the world with the possible exception of Japan. So I'm just wondering if it's that way with Latinos.
Okay, so I was wondering that you were talking about how many people were expected to actually die in the United States. There was an expert talking about it or something?
Well, there was the expert, I hope he's a bit of an expert. He's Trump's point man. He's the top doctor, and as we've seen in Canada with Theresa Tam and what's their name, Hennessy or something like that here in Alberta. They're the top doctors are pretty. They're, when they got them, I think got them out of the gutters. I'm exaggerating, but they're incompetent.
Okay, so what did he say?
So he said, well, it's 40,000. This was not yesterday, but the day before. I think he was saying it's 40,000. We have to accept the possibility of it going. So this is Dr. Fauci or whatever his name is. The possibility of it soaring to 100,000 new cases a day. And when it gets to that point, some of the places it's going to be 10% death rate. It's 10% death rate with 100,000 cases. That's 10,000 a day. 9/11 was 3,000, and that was one day, hopefully for all time. So, how many Americans died in Vietnam? 55,000, they say. Well, that would be, if they kept on doing that, that would be, after 5 days, they would be having as many people die in the United States as died in Vietnam, but that's in less than a week.
Okay, 94. Terramycin was so successful that Pfizer had quarter of the world's antibiotic sales in 1960s. Page 99, virtually, again. Like terramycin and oromycin, but more stable and potent, tetracycline, first semi-synthetic antibiotic by Pfizer. Page 121, L-glutavite article published in Journal of Clinical Experimental Psychopathology, March 1958. Arthur was editor-in-chief, and Felix Ibanez was international editor. Mortimer and Raymond were two directors. Ray Morton, Arthur Sackler, Jewish communists. I don't know why that was in there. At least one file on Raymond Sackler, created by the New York field office, was destroyed by the Bureau on November 12, 1970. Pfizer, conflict of interest. Sometimes I just make notes that don't really make a lot of sense. 140, birth control pill marketed as sexual women's liberation, reproductive rights, 1960s. Cofalver, Frolic, Ortho Pharma Corp. 141, Sackler, Be Happy pill, amphetamines. 149, most prescription drugs in the late 1950s, early 1960s, return on average 20% net profit. Tranquilizer barbiturates return 35 to 55%. And second only to antibiotics. 177, Francis Kelsey, the FDA medical officer who refused to approve the sale of thalidomide in the U.S., was appointed the chief of the new investigational drug branch. In 1963, Kelsey's protocol. Every pharma company had to convince the investigational drug branch that the proposed medicine had no serious adverse effects and demonstrated therapeutic effectiveness in animal testing prior to trial. Due to cost-profit analysis, pharma firms withdrew a quarter of their pending drug applications at the FDA. The NEST testing protocol was costly. 189. The Rolling Stones sang about Valium in their 1966 hit, Mother's Little Helper. Mother needs something today to calm her down, and though she's not really ill, there's a little yellow pill. Valium was the pharma industry's first $100 million drug.
That song, incidentally, was almost as bad as Valium.
Oh.
It's one of the worst they ever put out.
Oh, that's
and they
too
put
bad.
out some lousy songs.
Librum, the first #1 selling drug in America, was concluded to be addictive and dangerous and riskier than cocaine and amphetamines. These conclusions were lost in the wake of JFK's murder. Page 200, Lyndon Johnson changed who ran the FDA. George Lorek was out after 11 years and James Goddard was in. He investigated the addictiveness of drugs. Milton and Equinol continued to lose market share to Roche, Librum, and Valium over the years of hearings. Page 202. Sybil was accused of hiding files about Ellipton's epilepsy drug, masculinizing young girls. Merck merged with Sharp and Dome, hid breast cancer findings in 4 of 6 dogs with an oral contraceptive combo. Page 203. Roche sent Aspects of Anxiety, an 80-page hardcover book, to almost 10,000 of the top prescribing physicians in the U.S. in 1965. This book was Arthur Sackler's marketing brainchild. Stress about breadwinning led to ulcers and increase in blood pressure in men, but didn't result in organic illness in women. Women developed behavioral disorders such as neurosis, hysteria, anxiety, and depression. Chapter title Anxiety in the Female Psyche explained why women are prone to an unstable emotional equilibrium. Page 219. Goddard frustrated he couldn't hold medical journals legally responsible if they ran drug ads that later turned out to be misleading. A scandal, 1963, ? Hundreds of patients, most with cancer, had been injected with live cancer cells to check immune response to new tumors. He was concerned that there hadn't been full disclosure. Dr. Chester Southam led the work. The American Cancer Society elected him their executive vice president in 1964. Page 221. It took the disclosure 6 years later of the 1930s Tuskegee syphilis experiments on poor African Americans to force a revision of informed consent rules. 1968 ? Goddard targeted rainbow pills composed of thyroid hormone and digitalis that had become a hallmark of weight loss clinics. Americans were spending $250 million annually on these doctors and another $120 million annually on the pills. The rainbow pills had been on the market for decades, but only recently had several deaths been linked to it. The FDA sees lots and lots of pills. 234. Side effects reporting from taking the birth control pills, headache, bloating, nausea, breast tenderness. 272. Enovid users developed blood clots and 30 patients had died. Most at risk were women over age 35. From 1966 to 1969, the FDA documented 1,034 instances of serious adverse effect, including 118 deaths, mostly from blood clots, few from strokes or hepatitis complications. Page 235, a 5-year study concluded that 80% of women who'd stopped taking it did so because they were bothered by side effects such as bloating, cramping, and water retention, not because of the side effects that could make them seriously ill. Page 236, 1968, British study concluded women on the pill had a 9 times greater chance of developing blood clots and were 7 times more likely to be fatal. Those were 7 times. 237, women on the pill were 2 times as likely as diaphragm users to develop cancer-like changes in their cervix. The risk was 6 times as likely for women over 35. Page 238, a Stafford pharmacist, Sumner Cadman, said, "The world stands on the threshold of a pill-caused cancer epidemic that will dwarf the thalidomide birth deformity tragedy. 8 million women in this country alone now serve as guinea pigs. The pill worked through the pituitary gland, which would inevitably cause long-term effects." Page 241, Dr. Herbert Ratner, physician and author, said, "The scientist in the laboratory has never had it so good. Women make superb guinea pigs. They don't cost anything. They clean their own cages, feed themselves, pay for their own pills, and remunerate the clinical observer. Estrogen is to cancer what fertilizer is to the wheat crop," said NIH scientist Roy Hertz. Page 257, heroin, LSD, ecstasy were Schedule 1, with marijuana, cocaine, methamphetamine, oxycodone, and fentanyl had medical uses. Cocaine in dental surgery as topical anesthetic, for example, were listed Schedule 2. Milltown amphetamines and barbiturates were listed Schedule 3 with recognized therapeutic benefits but moderate risk of dependence. Page 262. Into the 1970s, most physicians thought cancer was one disease defined by the organ in which it was discovered. Now cancer is recognized as approximately 200 distinct diseases, each identified by molecular alterations, no matter where in the body it's found. Page 262. Federal government war on cancer. The National Cancer Institute's budget now exceeded $1 billion. 85% of the new funding went to investigator-initiated research, most clinical testing for advanced chemo drugs. So I'm going to stop there for now because I've read a lot.
You fit that all in?
I don't know.